She wasn't a sinner. The hidden life of Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene wasn't a sinner, and yet for centuries, the world has been told otherwise. From the moment her name first appeared in the Gospels, it has been shrouded in misunderstanding, misrepresentation, and outright distortion. Please subscribe to the channel. There is a tension here, a crack in the story as it has been passed down, that invites a deeper look. Who was she really? Not just as a historical figure, but as a living, breathing woman whose life intersected with one of the most transformative movements in human history. There is a mystery in her story, a space between what has been told and what was lived, a shadow that stretches across centuries. She is both celebrated and silenced, revered and maligned, known to millions, yet truly understood by few. And it is this very tension between the widely accepted story and the hidden truth that makes her so compelling. It is a story that begins not with scandal or shame, but with profound devotion, courage, and transformation. For centuries, tradition has painted her with a brush of moral judgment. Mary Magdalene, the Gospels say, was healed of 7 demons, but popular culture transformed that fact into a tale of sin, portraying her as a repentant prostitute, a cautionary figure whose life had to be redeemed by Jesus. Artists, theologians, and storytellers, eager to create moral examples, embraced this interpretation and made it canonical in the minds of the public. From Renaissance paintings to modern films, the image of Mary as the fallen woman clinging to salvation became deeply embedded in the cultural imagination. Every brushstroke, every line of poetry, every sermon reinforced the idea. She was a sinner saved, a woman marked by shame, whose story was only meaningful because of her need for redemption. Yet this narrative, so widely accepted, has no basis in Scripture. It was never written in the Gospels that Mary was a prostitute. This image is a construction, a carefully crafted story meant to serve social, theological, and political purposes. By framing her as sinful, the Church could maintain control over the role of women, limiting their spiritual authority and reinforcing patriarchal norms. The truth of her life, her independence, and her profound involvement in Jesus' ministry was overshadowed, replaced by a story designed to contain her influence. In the Gospels themselves, however, a different Mary Magdalene emerges. She is healed, yes, freed from 7 demons, but this is not simply a metaphor for sin. It is a transformation that signifies completeness, renewal, and empowerment. She is not defined by her past or by a moral failing. She is defined by the power of her own experience, by the radical change that sets her on a path of purpose and agency. The Gospels show her as a devoted follower of Jesus, one who travels with him and his disciples, witnessing miracles, teachings, and acts of compassion. She listens, she learns, she supports, she acts. She is present at the most critical moments of his ministry, standing alongside him in ways that many of the male disciples do not. Her story is not one of passivity, but of engagement, not of weakness, but of resilience. She is a figure of strength and discernment, a woman whose life embodies the transformative power of faith and devotion. This Mary Magdalene is a witness, a participant, a force in the narrative of Jesus' life, not an accessory, not a cautionary tale. Her identity in the Gospels is one of empowerment, spiritual awakening, and radical devotion. She is both disciple and leader, transformed and transformative, a woman whose presence demands recognition and respect. Mary Magdalene's life was marked by a remarkable independence, rare for any woman in her time. In a society that expected women to be subservient, quiet, and confined to the domestic sphere, she stood out as a figure of agency and resourcefulness. She had the means to support herself, and she chose to dedicate her resources and energy to a mission larger than herself. She traveled with Jesus and the disciples, contributing not just her presence, but also her wealth, ensuring that the work could continue unimpeded. In doing so, she demonstrated a combination of courage and foresight, a willingness to step into roles that were socially unconventional and yet spiritually vital. While most women were confined by the dictates of family, tradition, and gendered expectation, Mary asserted her autonomy, using her influence to sustain a movement of radical love, teaching, and compassion. She was a benefactor, a supporter, and a participant in ministry, challenging the norms of her society simply by existing in full expression of her gifts. Her independence was mirrored by an inner strength that became most evident in times of crisis. When fear and uncertainty gripped others, she remained steadfast, embodying a presence that was both stabilizing and inspiring. She was not a shadow of the disciples, she was a companion in every sense of the word. Her choices reflected intentionality and purpose. She chose to follow, to serve, to witness, and to act. The very act of being there, of traveling through towns and villages, listening, observing, and contributing, was a form of rebellion against a world that sought to marginalize women. And yet, this rebellion was not loud or violent. It was a quiet, persistent assertion of value, capability, and dignity. Through her actions, she showed that devotion and leadership were not mutually exclusive, that faith could empower as much as it could guide, and that the divine could work through anyone willing to embrace their own strength. When the storms of history and of human cruelty arrived, her loyalty became even more apparent. As Jesus faced the ultimate test of his mission, many of the male disciples fled, paralyzed by fear, shame, and uncertainty. Mary, however, did not turn away. She was present in the Garden of Gethsemane, where betrayal was plotted. She stood at the trials, where injustice and false accusation threatened. She accompanied him to Golgotha, where the weight of human cruelty and divine purpose collided in a moment of unimaginable sorrow. Her courage was steadfast, unflinching in the face of suffering and the threat of danger. She witnessed the crucifixion, a scene of agony and despair, yet did not falter. While others scattered, she remained, a quiet but unyielding presence at the heart of the story. Her presence at the cross was more than devotion. It was radical faith in action, a demonstration that love, loyalty, and courage can persist where fear seeks to dominate. And in the aftermath of despair, she became the first to encounter what no one else had yet seen: the risen Christ. In that moment, the world shifted. She saw him, not as a distant teacher or a figure of history, but alive, radiant, and transformative. He called her by name, not once, but in a tone that conveyed intimacy, recognition, and trust. In that simple act, she was affirmed in her identity, her agency, and her place in the unfolding mission. She was not a messenger among many. She was entrusted with a message that carried life, hope, and the power to transform the world. She was to go to the disciples, to tell them what she had seen, to bear witness to a reality that challenged all expectations, all hierarchies, and all limitations imposed by society. In that moment, Mary Magdalene became the apostle to the apostles, a revolutionary figure whose authority was validated not by position, privilege, or gender, but by encounter, insight, and fidelity. Her role was unprecedented. She was the first to grasp the truth of resurrection, the first to be entrusted with its proclamation, and the first to embody a new paradigm of spiritual leadership. Her experience shattered conventional notions of who could be a leader, who could hold sacred knowledge, and who could carry the weight of divine responsibility. She moved through fear, grief, and uncertainty with clarity and courage, emerging not only as a witness, but as a bearer of hope and transformation. In the act of being present, in the act of seeing, and in the act of proclaiming, she redefined what it meant to follow, to serve, and to lead. Mary Magdalene's story is a testament to the power of unwavering devotion, to the strength that comes from independence, and to the revolutionary nature of being entrusted with truth. In her presence, courage and faith are inseparable, and in her witness, the limitations of societal expectation are transcended. Despite the power, courage, and wisdom Mary Magdalene demonstrated, the story that history tells is not the story she lived. By the 6th century, the official church had begun to reshape her image in ways that suited a patriarchal agenda. Pope Gregory the Great played a pivotal role in this transformation, conflating her identity with that of an unnamed sinful woman mentioned in the Gospels. This decision was not accidental. It was a strategic move. By reframing Mary as a repentant prostitute, the Church could maintain strict control over the spiritual authority afforded to women, effectively silencing a figure whose very presence challenged the norms of male-dominated hierarchy. Her teachings, her leadership, and her proximity to Jesus were overshadowed by a narrative that depicted her as fallen, in need of redemption, and ultimately subordinate. The radical independence she displayed, the courage she embodied, and the spiritual authority she held were all diminished in the historical record, replaced by an image designed to preserve male dominance and control over religious interpretation. This suppression had far-reaching consequences. Art, sermons, literature, and popular imagination all reinforced the new, distorted narrative. Mary Magdalene became a cautionary tale, a symbol of sin redeemed by male intervention, rather than a leader and confidant in her own right. Paintings immortalized her weeping at the foot of the cross, often in poses of vulnerability or shame, while the Gospel's depictions of her active role in ministry were minimized or ignored. The story told to generations was one of moral lesson, not of spiritual authority. Women in the church were reminded, through her story, that their power was conditional, that leadership was reserved for men, and that even the most devoted and capable women had to be defined by repentance rather than initiative. The layers of distortion grew thicker with each passing century, embedding in culture a version of Mary Magdalene that was as compelling as it was inaccurate. She was known but not understood, revered but constrained, immortalized but erased. Yet, hidden beneath centuries of suppression were whispers of a different truth, waiting to be rediscovered. Gnostic texts, long dismissed or hidden from mainstream scholarship, offered a radically different portrayal of Mary Magdalene. In these writings, she is not a repentant sinner, but a confidant, a teacher, and a guide. The Gospel of Mary, along with other Gnostic texts, presents her receiving esoteric teachings directly from Jesus, learning spiritual truths that were often contested by male disciples, particularly Peter. These texts reveal the tension between established authority and spiritual insight, highlighting how Mary's knowledge and leadership were both respected and challenged. She engages in profound dialogue, guiding others through doubt and fear, interpreting teachings with clarity, and demonstrating a deep, intuitive understanding of the divine. In these accounts, she is not marginalized but central, a figure whose wisdom is recognized, debated, and ultimately transformative. Her authority in the Gnostic writings underscores a remarkable aspect of early spiritual movements, that women were not merely participants but holders of knowledge and conveyors of truth. Mary Magdalene emerges as a teacher of mystical insight, a guide for disciples navigating the uncertainties of faith after Jesus' death, and a testament to the power of inner awakening over external hierarchy. The rediscovery of these texts in later centuries has allowed scholars, seekers, and spiritual aspirants to glimpse a Mary who is fully human and fully empowered, whose role was active, dynamic, and revolutionary. These writings illuminate a reality that had been suppressed, that Mary Magdalene was not only present in the most pivotal moments of Jesus' ministry, but that she was entrusted with knowledge, leadership, and the responsibility to guide others, a responsibility denied to her in the official narratives for centuries. Through these recovered texts, the true Mary Magdalene begins to emerge from the shadows of distortion. She is a woman of intellect, insight, and courage, whose life and mission challenge the patriarchal structures that sought to define her. She represents a model of spiritual authority that transcends gender, a radical reimagining of leadership, and a testament to the persistence of truth, even when buried beneath centuries of suppression. In rediscovering her story, the veil is lifted, and a new narrative unfolds, one of empowerment, wisdom, and resilience, revealing a woman who was never meant to be silent, never meant to be constrained, and never meant to be forgotten. After the resurrection, Mary Magdalene stepped into a role that no one else could fill. She became not merely a witness, but a teacher, a guide for those who were bewildered, grieving, and uncertain. The male disciples, who had fled in fear and doubt, were suddenly confronted with the living reality of what Mary had seen. She did not speak from speculation or hearsay. She spoke from experience, from the intimate encounter with the risen Christ that transformed her understanding and fortified her courage. In these moments, she assumed a quiet but undeniable authority. Peter, James, and the others, grappling with fear and their own sense of inadequacy, looked to her guidance. Mary, calm and grounded, instructed them not with force, but with clarity, patience, and the compelling authority of someone who had truly seen and understood. Her presence became a stabilizing force, a light in the fog of confusion, and a conduit through which the message of resurrection and transformation could flow. The Gnostic texts emphasize this unique role. Mary is portrayed not simply as a follower, but as a custodian of secret knowledge, a mediator between the teachings of Jesus and the fledgling community of believers. She holds conversations with the other disciples, explaining, interpreting, and even challenging them when their understanding falls short. Peter, often depicted as the strong but sometimes impulsive figure, questions her authority, revealing the tension between institutional hierarchy and spiritual insight. But Mary remains composed, unwavering, offering guidance rooted in direct experience and deep spiritual wisdom. In these interactions, she embodies a principle that remains radical even today, that leadership is not conferred by status or title, but by clarity, courage, and understanding. She demonstrates that true authority is earned through fidelity to truth, a model that transcends gender, time, and social convention. Yet even as she embodied this transformative authority, the institutional structures of the early church worked to limit and erase her influence. The canonical texts that survived were carefully curated to prioritize male apostles and leaders, and the teachings that elevated women's roles were excluded. Mary's wisdom, her guidance, and the very legitimacy of her leadership were marginalized. The letters and writings of figures such as Peter and Paul, while foundational for the emerging church, inadvertently or deliberately reinforced a hierarchical structure that diminished women's voices. Mary Magdalene, who had stood at the cross and received the first vision of the risen Christ, whose knowledge was profound and whose courage was unparalleled, was relegated to a footnote in the narrative of spiritual authority. Her story, once central to the early movement, was systematically narrowed, filtered, and reshaped to conform to a patriarchal framework, reinforcing norms that restricted women's roles in both spiritual and societal leadership. Despite centuries of suppression, Mary's legacy could not be entirely erased. Rediscovered Gnostic texts, manuscripts hidden away for millennia, and modern scholarship have slowly begun to restore her place in history. The Gospel of Mary, among other writings, paints a picture of a woman who was not only present but central, whose insight and authority rivaled and often surpassed that of her male counterparts. In contemporary times, these rediscoveries resonate powerfully with spiritual seekers, feminists, historians, and anyone drawn to the notion of courage and wisdom transcending social constraints. Mary Magdalene emerges as a symbol of empowerment, resilience, and divine connection. Her story invites reflection on how narratives are constructed, whose voices are amplified, and whose are silenced. Today, she inspires those seeking to reclaim spiritual agency and leadership. Her life challenges the entrenched assumptions of patriarchy and hierarchy, calling on each individual to reconsider what it means to witness, to teach, and to lead. She embodies transformation, personal, spiritual, and societal, showing that courage and wisdom are not bounded by gender, culture, or time. For those who encounter her story now, she serves as a mirror, reflecting the possibility of radical faith, unwavering loyalty, and the profound impact of embracing one's authentic calling. To reclaim Mary Magdalene's legacy is not merely to rewrite history, it is to embrace a living example of empowerment, spiritual insight, and resilience, a reminder that truth persists, even when silenced, and that each individual has the capacity to awaken, transform, and guide. Her journey, from independence and courage to suppression and rediscovery, stands as a testament to the enduring power of vision, faith, and authority. She is no longer just a figure of the past, she is a symbol for the present and the future, a call to awaken the leader within, to trust in one's own experience, and to recognize that true empowerment comes not from external approval, but from fidelity to truth, love, and the courage to stand when others flee. Mary Magdalene's story is a revolutionary narrative of possibility, a reminder that even the most marginalized voices can shape history, and that the radical act of seeing, understanding, and teaching can ripple across time, inspiring generations to reclaim their own power, wisdom, and spiritual insight.